Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 2023 TEDxYouth Berwyn Conference. We are so excited to bring you our 4th annual conference. Our team greatly enjoys planning our events, and we are so grateful for the support that you, our audience, have given us. This year's conference theme is Small Actions, Big Impacts. We wanted to build on our previous year's themes, pushing forward, society and self, and breaking barriers. Small Actions, Big Impacts is all about how our decisions can create ripples beyond what we may expect. How can we take small steps to achieve the change we want to see in our communities? This theme is all about how actions, even ordinary ones, can lead to positive outcomes. Today, you will hear from 6 amazing speakers who will take their own perspective on this theme. They will share their life lessons, personal experiences, and messages with our community. We hope you enjoy.
Although it may seem like countless small actions are needed to achieve a final goal, the task may not be that daunting. Sometimes, just one word, one gesture, or one smile can create the ripple effect that can positively influence a community. To start our conference, Brian Dzingai, an Olympic track and field finalist, will share his narrative on adversity and perseverance. He will show us the importance of taking small, consistent actions to achieve a larger goal. Sustaining a routine, as we will learn, may be the key to accomplishing our future goals.
Allow me to pose a question. Let's close your eyes and let's take a step back in time. Try to recall where you were and what you're doing on Wednesday, August 28, 2008. Just to be clear, it's not my kid's birthday, nor is it my wedding anniversary. On that day, I was at the world-renowned Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing, China, preparing for the most pivotal moment of my athletic career. I was getting ready to race against the great Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man, in an Olympic 200-meter dash final. How did a 5'6" kid from Zimbabwe end up on a grand stage like this? How was I going to react in my David versus Goliath moment? To help you understand, let me take you on a journey back in time. The year is 1998, and I'm a high school junior. With only one loss in 5 years, I'm a sure bet to win anytime I step on the track. I just finished dominating in the 100-meter and 200-meter dash races, and as I'm walking off the track, I notice a figure walking towards me. As it gets closer and closer, I realize who it is. It is Mitch, my high school captain from 8th grade. Mitch walks up to me, and we exchange pleasantries, and immediately tells me that I have the talent level to pursue track and field on a much higher level. This is a great honor and compliment coming from somebody like Mitch, as he was somebody I looked up to growing up. And it is in that moment the initial seed is planted that I could pursue track and field on a collegiate level. Mitch and I exchange emails, and we go our separate ways, but that chance encounter resonates with me until we connect 10 years later. Little did I know that brief conversation was going to change the course of my life forever. Mitch had planted a seed. But what is a seed without action? A seed without action is potential that has not yet been realized. I took that seed that Mitch gave me and applied to schools in the United States. That small action landed me at Truman State University. Truman State University offered me a partial academic and a partial athletic scholarship for a total of $6,000, and my parents only had to pay out of pocket $1,000 plus my room and board. The head track coach at Truman State University was a man called Coach Ed Schneider. I had picked up a phone from Zimbabwe and called Coach Schneider and told him that I was coming to his institution and asked him if he had any additional scholarship money. And that simple phone call, that simple action, had landed me that scholarship. I arrived at Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, and boy, is that place in the middle of nowhere. This was the first time in my life I had been that far away from home, and this only made me homesick, and I was looking for a parental figure. Coach Ed became that father figure. In fact, every Monday morning, I'll stop by Coach Ed's office, and we'll talk about my performances from the previous weekend and discuss the little things that I had to do that week in practice to prepare for my next race. This led to the strengthening of the bond between Coach Ed and I, and this became a Monday morning routine. As the year went by and the summertime came around, it was time for me to leave. My plan was to go to London and live with my sister for the summer, and my main goal was to work as hard as I could and save as much money as I could because I wanted to remove all financial burden from my parents because Zimbabwe was going through economic hardship. A few days before I was supposed to leave for the summer, I decided to go see Coach Ed again like a typical Monday morning routine. As I walked into Coach Ed's office, he could tell that there was something that was bothering me. We exchanged pleasantries, and I immediately told Coach Ed that there was a 90% chance that I wasn't coming back. It was becoming increasingly difficult for my parents in Zimbabwe to keep supporting me financially. The look in his face was one of total shock. How could this kid who was an All-American athlete really not consider coming back? How could this kid who had broken so many school records not want to come back to this institution? I walked out of Coach Ed's office not knowing what to expect. The very next day, Coach Ed called me and offered me a full scholarship. I took a small action, which was showing up at Coach Ed's office every Monday morning, and I was consistent with that action. And that consistency turned into routine. And that routine led to the development of a stronger bond between Coach Ed and I. And that ultimately played a role in him offering me a full scholarship. We all have seeds that require us to take action. And action requires routine. Routine requires consistency. And that consistency is what will allow us to reap the harvest. After 2 years at Truman State University, I decided to transfer to the big boys, and I went to Florida State University, where I was met with high expectations and an immense amount of pressure. I struggled a great deal in my junior year, and I started to hear whispers and murmurs about how I wasn't deserving of the full scholarship. Truthfully speaking, the pressure starts to get to me, and the mind games start creeping in. Going to my senior year, I make a decision. I am going to enjoy every race like it's my last. I'm going to savor every moment with my teammates because I know that this is all coming to an end. I decide to have fun. What is fun? Fun is an acronym that stands for flourishing under no pressure. It is the ability to thrive and develop in a positive way without feeling stressed or overwhelmed by external expectations or demands. Due to that shift in mindset in my senior year, where every race and competition were fun, I ran extremely well. In my very first race of the outdoor season in 2004, I ran the fastest time I had run in 4 years. Not only was this a personal best time, it was an Olympic A qualifying standard. I had arrived, I was having fun, I was going to be an Olympic athlete. What happens when we stop having fun? The pressure starts to kick in, and we start to worry about those things which we cannot control. In the sport and track and field, they teach you to focus on your lane because that is the only thing that you can control. How can you take control of your lane? You need to have a plan. A plan gives you the guidance and the framework which allows you to understand the small tasks and actions you need to take to achieve your dreams and goals. How many of us walk through life without a plan? Being an Olympic athlete was never part of my plan. It just happened. I arrived at the Athens Olympic Games as the 7th fastest man in the world in the 200-meter dash, and I was expected to make the final and compete for a podium position. But guess what? I didn't make it past the second round. Why is that? it wasn't part of my plan to make it that far. But guess what too? The future Olympic champion, Usain Bolt, also didn't make it past the second round. I recall watching that final from the Olympic Stadium, sitting in the nosebleeds, and taking a few minutes after that race to soak in what was happening in the moment as I watched the top 3 athletes take their lap of honor and watch the rest of the finalists gracefully exit the track. And have a sense of sadness because I knew that I was supposed to be on that track that evening. I felt this raging fire light up inside of me, telling me that I wanted to know what it felt like to be an Olympic finalist. The very next day, I sat down with my coach Ken, and we talked about what we could have done differently to prepare for that moment. What small actions could we have taken that would have given me a legitimate shot at making that Olympic final? It was then that I decided that I am going to commit to a 4-year plan that is going to give me a legitimate shot at making the next Olympic final. I am committing to taking small, consistent actions compounded over 1,460 days to chase my dream. I am going to train for 1,460 days, 35,000 hours, 208 weeks, and 2 million minutes to prepare for 4 races that last a grand total of 80 seconds. How was I going to achieve that? That's the easy part. I had to find my edge. My edge was going to be my ability to show up every day with great execution through my small actions. During that 1,460-day cycle, I made sure that I showed up every day. Whether it was the way I ate, the way I slept, the way I trained in the weight room, or the way I trained on the track. I was always trying to find the incremental gain, since track and field is a sport of margins, and I knew that edge was going to make a difference. In the same way that I was trying to find that edge in my quest for Olympic glory, you too can find your edge as you try to seek and achieve your goals in your daily life. It was a long and winding road, and I knew that it was always going to be difficult. And I knew that I had to stick to my plan because I had made a commitment to my plan. Throughout this whole journey, I had to consistently remind myself to have fun because that would allow me to flourish under no pressure. The hard work started to pay off, and in 2007, in my very first race of the outdoor season, I ran an Olympic qualifying standard. I arrived at the Beijing Olympics as one of the top 20 athletes in the world in the 200-meter dash. I was having a career year on the European circuit, and my confidence was at an all-time high. Due to my enhanced profile on the European circuit, I was bestowed one of the greatest honors any athlete could ever get. I was asked to be the flag bearer for my country of Zimbabwe. On August 26, 2008, I ran my first 2 qualifying races, and through those first 2 rounds, I had the fastest times out of all the athletes. This was a major confidence booster, and I knew that at this point, I only had to execute well in one more race to qualify for the final. On August 27, 2008, I ran my semi-final race, and I placed second to Sharandi Martina. That was good enough to place me in the Olympic final. The great Usain Bolt, the same man who hadn't qualified past the second round 4 years earlier, also qualified for that Olympic final. On August 28, 2008, I, Brian Dzingai, the 5'6" kid from Zimbabwe, competed in a historic, world record-breaking Olympic final against the great Usain Bolt and came 4th place. 1,460 days later, I was an Olympic finalist. My plan had been executed to perfection because of the small actions that I had taken. People ask me all the time if I'm disappointed about not making the top 3. My simple answer is no. The sport of track and field gave me a free education, it gave me an ability to travel to over 40 different countries, and granted me the opportunity to be a 2-time Olympic athlete. As I went through this journey, I had to find ways to celebrate the micro victories. And this led me to the development of something called return on sweat. This is my way of measuring the value of my time and effort invested through my small actions. The return on sweat takes into account the beneficial impact as a factor of your time and effort invested through your small actions. This is very similar to the concept in finance called ROI, which stands for return on investment. As you go through your life journey, try to make sure that you're having fun, because that is the only way that you will continue to flourish under no pressure. And make sure that you attack every day with great execution, because that is your edge. But most important of all, make sure that you hold yourself accountable by measuring your return on sweat. These 3 principles are the primary reason why I'm standing here in front of you today. Thank you.
As Brian just discussed, when challenges and obstacles arise, it is important that we persevere through them with our small actions. Even if we think that we cannot do something, it is important that we recover and keep working towards our goals. Our next speaker, Mia Hazlett, will be discussing her journey to employment as a single professional mother. By introducing the 3 steps to rejection recovery, Mia will share her story, how to recuperate from the response no, and how to build the confidence until you hear your yes.
No, 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 no. How many no's will it take for you to give up on your dreams? If you came up with a number, then you give the word no way too much power. It is a simple, 1-syllable, 2-letter word. You cannot allow it to be dream snatching. If you want to hear yes, then that is the word you must focus on. But to hear a yes after 1, 2, 100 no's, then you must confidently master rejection recovery. That allows you to focus on achieving your dream and to stop dwelling on a simple word. Your desire to succeed must motivate you through all adversity when pursuing success. My career spans almost 30 years. I've built it off of the yeses that I've received. Apply, interview, yes. But my professional life is the greatest part of my life, where I have received rejection after rejection. There's not one employed person that I know who has received a yes to every job they've applied to. Not one. Now, if you have a job and you're looking for work, the sting of rejection isn't as harsh. But if you're not working and you need a job, well, rejection hits a little differently. There was a span in my life when I was unemployed, 15 months to be exact. I was a single mother with 2 children in the pursuit of employment. Looking for a job was my full-time job. Application after application. Now, they told me no in the most professional manner. Thank you for applying. Unfortunately, ... So many reasons over all those months. And then there was, we'll keep your resume on file should a job arise in the future matching your qualifications. And then my favorite, good luck on your future endeavors. They all closed with that one. But the hardest rejection to take were the no responses at all. They did not even acknowledge me. Those were the loudest no's. Over 100 applications in those 15 months, and at least 10 interviews. Nothing. As a single mother with no income, the no's couldn't hold any weight. I had to find a job, and I was not going to stop until I had an offer. At this point, I can't even tell you who told me no, because the only thing I was focused on was that one yes I finally received after over a year of unemployment. Now, those months weren't easy, but they allowed me to master rejection recovery. With rejection recovery, there are 3 steps you must take confidently. Process no, accept no, and move on. Trust me, confidence is hard when you're feeling defeated. I was relying on the grace and mercy of family and friends to put a roof over our heads. I was grocery shopping at the dollar store, sometimes getting clothes from there too. I had to find a job. It got to the point I didn't even care about the rejection letters. But after my first few interviews, I needed to know why I was not getting called back. I couldn't process all the rejection. I finally sent my resume to a recruiter. They told me my resume was horrible. Although that hurt, and although they helped me fix it, still, good luck on your future endeavors. Ultimately, I had to both accept and move on. I had to pursue all those future endeavors they wished me good luck with. When you realize no is part of goal achievement, you strip it of all its power and negative connotation. When I finally reached out to the recruiter and asked why, I was able to process and accept all the rejection. I realized the employers were not saying no to me personally. They had one job, probably 100 applications. They had to give away 99 no's and only one yes. But you see, I had to be that one yes. Lifetime unemployment was not an option. And through my steadfast focus on getting a yes, on getting the offer, it had me in tears when I finally signed that offer letter. It's what I wanted, it's what I achieved, and it's ultimately what changed the course of my professional career. But even within my yeses, I've received no's. No to promotions, no to raises. But because I mastered rejection recovery, I was able to process, accept, and move on. Now, it may not have been the answer that I wanted, but part of accepting rejection is realizing no is an answer. It should give you peace of mind to have an answer to your question. Because then and only then can you determine if you really want the yes or if you'll settle for the no. In other words, in the face of rejection, will you lower your expectations? It goes back to my first question. How many no's will it take for you to give up on your dreams? Will you be the one who doesn't get the promotion, you don't get the raise, you throw up your hands and say, oh well, I tried? Or maybe even worse, you won't even ask the question because you're so scared to hear no. I know those people. In fact, I've been those people who has said, oh, I didn't even ask because I knew they would say no. When you don't ask the question, that's when you introduce regret to your situation. You think, what if? What if they had said yes? What if they had said no? You have no control over what they say. You can only question yourself. What if you had really asked for what you wanted and deserved? What if you didn't quit before you tried? Because I'm here to tell you, rejection is part of the journey to success. It creates the detours along the direct path that you want to take, but it should never allow you to give up on you. Because you have to be your biggest fan, your biggest advocate. Only you control what you will regret. No one else. You determine how long your list of regrets is going to be. And from my heart of hearts, I hope it's a short list. But the only way to have a short list is to focus on the yes and stop dwelling on the no. Look, I don't know what it is that you want or that you're too scared to ask for. Or maybe you think you don't even deserve something because somebody in your past told you no. What I do know is you give way too much power to a simple, one-syllable, two-letter word. Way too much. Now is the time to shake off those lowered expectations, to get up out of that chair of complacency that you settled for. Because as I've shared, my journey through unemployment, it wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't comfortable. But that one yes, when I finally received it, far outweighed any no along the way. Wipe your slate clean. Think of all the rejection that you've been through, or maybe that you're currently facing. Process it, accept it, and move on. Because now when I ask you, how many no's will it take for you to give up on your dreams? A number shouldn't even exist. Because now is the time to move on to those future endeavors and pursue your yes.
Mia just described her experiences with rejection and resiliency. Sometimes that yes may take a long time to achieve, but with Mia's shared insights, we can have a clear understanding of how to recover from rejection. When we are rejected, we may feel that our perspectives are not being valued or heard. This can also arise from a lack of representation. In our next talk, Elisha Fernandez, a current senior in college, will share her perspectives on the importance of increasing minority representation in the literary world and how this can be done in 3 steps.
Do you remember the first time you found yourself lost in a book? My mom tells me that I started reading when I was around 3 years old. I was actually 8 months old when I started organizing my books by size, color, and in alphabetical order. I quickly advanced from picture books to early reader chapter books to volumes of fantasy and self-help. I would visualize myself as a thin, graceful princess with smooth ivory skin, long blonde hair, and 2 perfect, loving parents. I admired Jo from Little Women and her tenacity in being a free-spirited writer, following her dreams despite what society told her. Hermione's wit and know-it-allness, coming up with clever and witty solutions to help her friends, and the imagination of Anne of Green Gables, who turned her entire world and the most hopeless of situations into colorful fairy tales. But looking in the mirror constantly reminded me that I would never look like or be like the heroines I so loved and looked up to. As a Dominican mixed-race girl growing in a single-parent household, I did not feel represented in the books I consumed. There was a disconnect between me and the subjects of the fairy tales and other books I read because I did not and could not relate. I found myself wondering why there couldn't be a Latina princess or heroine with a curvy body, thick brown hair, and a single mom. So I set out on my own journey to find these characters in books. I pored over hundreds of books, longing for a character like me, one I could read about and feel an instant connection. I dreamed of the day I could read about a character and think, wow, they're just like me. It turns out I'm not alone in these experiences, at least in terms of publication statistics. Lee & Low Books conducted a diversity baseline study in 2019, finding that in the publishing industry, there is an evident problem with representation and diversity. 76% of authors in the industry self-reported as white or Caucasian, and this is reflected in the characters they write about. As one quote by musician Lane Staley puts it, "We write about ourselves because we know about ourselves." Since most authors are white, there aren't many Latino characters in books. Feeling this disconnect urged me to look for answers.
Where were the characters and authors of color? Why was there such an issue with representation in publishing? What could I do about it? Little Elisha was frustrated and devastated, really, because no one looked or acted like her in the books she was reading. I remember asking my mom these same questions, and how she responded inspired me and directed me to the path I'm on today, to be here on this stage. She encouraged me to be the solution. So I decided to do something about it and pursue a degree in editing and publishing. I found that no one else was talking about this representation issue. My goal became increasing and improving the representation of people of color in literature so that they could feel seen and heard. I recently completed a thesis at my university with the aim to talk to young adults of color and ask for their thoughts on representation in literature. I surveyed over 400 young adults who identified as Black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, and otherwise people of color from ages 18 to 26, asking them a series of questions on how we can improve the portrayal of BIPOC, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color in literature, how literary inclusion impacts their reading habits, and most importantly, how representation impacts their lives. After months of intensive research, I confirmed that representation does matter. I discovered that young adults of color really crave representation in the books they're reading. They want to see more main characters like them, with stories centered around BIPOC narratives. Feeling seen and heard by book characters prompts us as readers to read more often and enjoy the books we're reading more. Young adults of color express that when they see themselves represented in these stories, they feel empowered. As one participant said, it's important for young people to see themselves represented in the stories that they read. It makes them feel like they can be the hero of their own story and that they can achieve anything they want to achieve. It also helps them realize that there are people like them out there and that they might not be alone in the experiences that they're feeling, facing challenges or feeling different from others. Do you see how powerful that is? Representation can also have a positive impact on identity, helping young adults find their place not only within a story, but in the world. One young woman expressed, quote, "Having diversified characters with different races and ethnicities would have had a profound impact on my identity as a biracial female. This would have been instrumental as a teenager, but even now as I navigate race and gender roles in America," end quote. These young adults also brought up a crucial point. It's not just representation that matters, but the natural integration and normalization of stories about people of color. I love how one girl put this, quote, "Just more natural inclusion would mean a lot. It doesn't have to be overt. I remember being obsessed with the Hunger Games for the tiny details of Katniss having darker skin and being a really quiet individual who struggled to make friends, which is exactly what I was like growing up. It was so impactful to me because never before had I had a story with a character like that or like me," end quote. The second thing I found was that we need to talk more about the stereotypes and book themes that discourage young adults of color from reading. One respondent mentioned one of their main pet peeves is when authors include several random ethnicity side characters to simply fill a diversity quota. Yet these characters have no personality, no character development, and no real culture that can appeal to audiences of color. As people of color, we are hyper aware of these stereotypes. Asian characters are seen as smart sidekicks, and Asian women are often shown as quiet or submissive. Black characters are sometimes characterized as violent or even abusive. Latin or Hispanic characters are similarly rendered as criminals, overly sexualized, or put in domestic service roles. Not only do these stereotypes create a disconnect between young adults of color and the literature we consume, it also takes a toll on our own self-worth and our perception of our own value in the world. I remember seeing Hispanic characters written as the antagonists, the bad guys, and the women specifically were destined for no more than a life in the background, or worse, torn down and degraded by other characters. The representations I saw of my own culture in not only books but other forms of media were demeaning, dehumanizing, and demoralizing. Watching these representations confused and saddened me. Was my family, was I anything more than entertainment for white peers to poke fun at? I remembered seeing Latina women represented as uneducated and unskilled. My mom would often get comments assuming her to be less capable or only capable of harm in the predominant white communities that we lived in. It was really heartbreaking for me to watch people treat her like a second-rate citizen. I can't help but wonder whether the media that these white communities consumed was largely responsible for their racial bias. Perhaps if our culture had been portrayed realistically and authentically, things might have been different. Possibly my favorite quote from a survey participant summed all this up perfectly. Quote, "Write us as more than our stereotypes. Show more of our multifaceted qualities because we all are, at the end of the day, people." The final important observation I made is that there simply isn't enough awareness about current literature that does include diverse characters. When asked for recommendations on what we can do to improve representation and increase representation of people of color in literature, one person said, "Make these books more widely known to young adults of color. I never read any books with Hispanic characters because I never hear of any," end quote. Young adults need these books in mainstream publishing, and these books must be included in our homes, our workplaces, and our classrooms. As we see with these quotes and these stories, the lack of representation in publishing needs to be addressed. We must do better. When young people see themselves represented positively in literature, it could boost their self-esteem, help them develop a positive sense of identity, and maybe even lead to greater success in life. On the other hand, when they're constantly bombarded with negative stereotypes and depictions of people in their ethnic or racial groups, it can have the opposite effect and lead to feelings of inadequacy and low self-worth. It's not just about the impact on young people, however. The lack of representation in publishing also has wider societal implications. When we don't see people of color represented in the mainstream, it reinforces the notion that we're somehow other or different from the norm. This can lead to prejudice and discrimination, and many people may subconsciously or consciously view people of color as less important or less valuable than others. Representation can rewrite our society's narrative of exclusion and homogeneity into one of inclusion and celebration of diversity. I have dedicated my professional life so far to researching the representation of people of color in literature, yet much more needs to be done. So, what can we do to push for more change? I've come up with 3 crucial steps. 1, first, we need to increase the number of diverse authors so that we can ensure that a wider range of voices and perspectives are represented in literature. I've contributed to this myself by writing and publishing my own works to add to the current collection of books written by Latina authors. If a young adult of color is watching this, on the fence about picking up the pen and telling their story, I tell you to do it. We need you and we need your stories. Continue reading and writing and don't give up hope because it's through us that this change can happen. If you have a young adult of color in your life, encourage them to write themselves into the narrative and provide them with the tools and resources that they need to succeed as writers. Second, we need to emphasize using more sensitivity, respect, and accuracy when telling stories about people of color. We need to encourage authors to write more complex and nuanced characters of color, moving beyond the tired old tropes that have been perpetuated for decades. We can do this by listening to authentic stories of people of color, reaching out to them with the aim of centering the narrative around them. And don't be afraid to speak up. Be willing to talk about the stereotypes that make you uncomfortable, and specifically why they shouldn't be used in the first place. We especially need more people who don't belong to the BIPOC communities to advocate for our voices, willing to hold the torch and amplify our concerns. Finally, we need to keep talking about this issue. By having conversations like the one we're having today, we can raise awareness of the importance of representation in publishing. Research authors of color so you can purchase and read their works. Support independent bookstores run by people of color and get involved in reading initiatives during Black History Month, Native American Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and Asian and Pacific Islanders Month. Through these actions, we can encourage publishers to do better. We can inspire young adults of color to get involved and write their own stories. Imagine what the world would be like if everyone's story was told. We can rewrite the narrative together. Thank you.
Before intermission, we heard Elisha discuss the importance of BIPOC representation in the stories that we tell. Representation has important societal and personal impacts. Our next speaker, Phoebe Omonira, an activist and pre-law student, will be presenting an outline on how you can find your superpower to impact your community. By sharing her personal experience, Phoebe will walk us through the way she found pieces of her purpose and how she uses that purpose to leave a positive impact in her community today.
When I was 11 years old, my mom took me with her to a women's conference. I sat at the very front row, listening intently to the guest speaker speak about the power of pushing through hardship in order to share their story with others as a testimony of survival and faith. It was the first time at such a young age that I felt inspired and riveted by someone else's story, and I wish that one day I would have the wisdom and poise she does. She spoke so much about how she had found her calling and felt at peace after this hardship she had faced. At 11, I wished and prayed that I would face a struggle severe enough that I too could come out with a sense of belonging, a better sense of understanding about the world around me. I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know how or what. Now, what my younger self didn't understand was that purpose can be found without going through a horrific, life-changing discovery. And my journey to come to that understanding is how I found my piece of purpose. A purposeful life is one in which we have a clear sense of direction and meaning. It means identifying your unique strengths and interests and using them to make a difference in the world around you. It means living a life based on your own beliefs and values, so you find more fulfillment in the things that you do. Merriam-Webster defines purpose as something set up as an object or an end to be attained. The 6 Seconds, the Emotional Intelligence Network, defines purpose as the cumulative effect of meaningful goals. It's the impact we want to have on the world around us. It allows us to set goals, take action, and overcome obstacles with greater ease and motivation. But it also requires willingness to take a risk, to step outside of our comfort zones, and to face our fears and insecurities. Discovering our purpose is an ongoing process of self-reflection, self-assessment, and exploration. It involves seeking guidance and mentorship along the way, but by taking intentional steps toward discovering our purpose, we are able to live a more fulfilling and more meaningful life while also contributing to our community. Walking with purpose is more important than chasing after recognition or even about getting that feeling of fulfillment, but it's about the ripple effect that you have on the world around you and how you engage with your community and ultimately the world. Now, for me as a kid, I was always talking. When I was in school, we had something called the Stanford test, which is effectively the STAR test, or State of Texas Assessments of Academic Readiness for homeschool kids. It would be time for the listening comprehension section of our test, and because I was known for being a bit of a chatterbox, there were some jokes about whether or not I would pass this portion of the exam. Now, of course, I always did, but my ability to communicate ideas effectively became one of my superpowers. Only when I shifted my perspective of communication from only contributing my ideas to understanding and elevating the ideas of others. Being purpose-driven means you identify your values, your superpowers, and your beliefs. When I realized being a communicator was one of my superpowers, I began to rely on it as the key to accomplishing my goals. However, I wasn't able to use this to aid in my purpose until I expanded my view of communication. I challenged myself to grow those listening skills to my broader community, both digitally and in real life. As later in life, I began working for an organization called Gen Z Girl Gang. GGG is an organization which aims to redefine sisterhood for a new generation. There, I work as the director of community and nonprofit partnerships. Throughout all of high school and middle school, I challenged myself to remember that promise I made to myself at 11 years old. To be a woman of purpose and continuously push myself to build up these soft skills that would help me in my future, from the smallest day-to-day things to more significant events. Now, I didn't have a speaking coach or someone to teach me organizational strategy and networking in high school, but what I did have was clubs, where I challenged myself to get more involved and speak up often. I had friends and family who I asked to listen and critique me as I prepared for speech and debate. I had to fine-tune these skills and gain confidence I would need in the future. Though most of all, I was content knowing that I was aligned in something that fit both my core beliefs and my values. Building communities where young people would feel seen, heard, and encouraged to use their gifts to impact others. It's important to identify what makes you unique and how to use those superpowers to contribute to the world around you in a specific way. These are things that come naturally to you, so ask yourself, what am I naturally gifted at? It's important to consider not only how these superpowers benefit yourself, but how they can be used in service for others. For example, if you're a great listener, you could use that skill to help others feel heard and understood. If you're a talented writer, you could use those skills to inspire and educate others, or share ideas that you hear from other people. By identifying your superpower, you can begin to see how you can make a meaningful contribution. The second step in identifying parts of your purpose is to identify your beliefs. These are the things that are most important to you in life. They're the principles that guide you and your decision-making and shape your worldview. Oftentimes, these values are established by our family and environment, but they can also be built on personal experience. For example, one of my core beliefs is the power of community care. At the center of community building and working in partnerships is having a heart not only for the people that we are serving and hope to uplift, but those we are working with as well. At GGG, we have a practice at the end of every call where we show our appreciation for each other. We popcorn it around the room, acknowledging the contributions or support our team has for one another, whether that be recent successes or something that we're celebrating for one another. Community care stretches beyond just the larger action of managing our community that is 15,000 members strong, but it starts on an institutional level. I find myself aligned when I realize the impact being a part of my team has on others. And at its core, identifying your purpose in the long term is about creating benefits that impact not just you, but someone other than yourself. Now that you have discovered your values and identified your superpowers, you have a clear idea of the small things that you are naturally gifted at and how they can pave the road for your future. Discovering your purpose, though, is just the beginning. The next step is deciding for yourself how you're going to walk in that purpose and what tools you'll need along the way. How do you plan on accomplishing your long-term goals? Community building aligned with skills I already had, but it took a deeper look into how I wanted to build community for me to feel aligned with the work I was doing. During my senior year of high school, I faced a range of challenges and accomplishments. However, what stood out to me was how I was cared for by my community and my ability to create community spaces where people felt comfortable being themselves. For me, it was essential to make others feel at ease and help them develop a sense of belonging as we were in a transitional phase of life. I realized that this was a vital aspect of building a purposeful life for myself. In this transitional phase of life, we were facing adversities that we were forced to be resilient in the face of. But I learned along the way that there's more importance in not just resilience, but having the emotional intelligence to deal with and understand when people are going through things that are invisible to you. I wanted to help others build their emotional intelligence and encourage them to find their purpose in life as well. I learned that growing your emotional intelligence through introspection is important, but growing your love for people is essential. This process is one that replicates itself time and time again as you grow and develop. As we age, so does our values and belief. But while different people have different values, one that will aid everyone in creating a life of purpose is empathy. The next step of learning how to walk in that purpose is about living a life that is not centered on just your perspective, but the perspectives of others. Empathy allows us to connect with others on a deeper level, to understand their perspective, and to make a positive impact on their lives. It's an important tool in your toolbox, no matter what impact you hope to leave on the world. Regardless of your industry or age, or even what you hope to do in the future, living an empathetic life should be tied to your values and the value you place on human connection. The smallest action you can take is to better understand yourself, so that you can walk in the world more aware of the positive and negative impacts you make on your community. On the smallest level, leading a purpose-filled life looks like genuinely caring about someone else, asking them, "How are you?" and meaning it. It's about showing kindness to those around us and being mindful of the impact that we have on their lives. It's important to acknowledge that this is a never-ending process and it requires continuous effort and self-reflection, but is one that benefits pay off more than we can ever realize. Leading a purposeful life is about discovering your values and superpowers and learning how to walk in that purpose. It's about living a life centered on empathy and self-reflection and building meaningful relationships. By doing so, we can impact others positively and create a ripple effect on our communities. As young people, we possess immense power to make a difference. However, our education system fails to include emotional intelligence training to prepare us for the future and help us avoid burnout. Instead, we constantly compare ourselves to each other and seek recognition in an ever-growing and ever-competitive world, rather than focusing on collaboration. By living in your purpose, you have the opportunity to inspire and lead by example, creating a positive ripple effect that can change both your community and the world. So, what would happen if we taught each other how to live a life aligned with our unique purposes rather than trying to conform to social expectations? We were born at this exact period of time with the world being more interconnected than ever. We are constantly told that we are setting a precedent for the future, and it's important that each person fulfills their individual goals in order to do so. So I encourage you to take the time to identify your strengths, beliefs, values, and superpowers, and utilize your own personal empathy and emotional intelligence to live a purpose-driven life. Thank you.
As Phoebe just demonstrated in her talk, walking with empathy and purpose can inspire others to do so as well, creating a chain reaction where people within communities can positively affect and uplift each other. In our next talk, Graham Cochrane will expand on this topic by highlighting the importance of giving to charity, which not only affects the receivers, but also the givers.
They say money can't buy happiness. But if it could, how much do you think it would cost? You see, over the past 10 years, I've made millions of dollars, and I've spent millions of dollars, and I've given away millions of dollars. And what I've discovered about the relationship between money and happiness, it might just surprise you, but it'll certainly encourage you. You know, growing up in my family, we always had enough, but it was clear that money was a finite resource, right? And how you managed it mattered. I figured the more of it I had, the better off I'd be. So after finishing high school, my plan was simple: become rich and famous. And leading into my senior year of college, I was working really hard at doing just that. I was trying to land a record deal. Because you see, my dream was to be a famous singer-songwriter, make music videos, tour the world. And fortunately for me, I had a songwriting professor in college who really believed in me, and he believed in my music. He took me under his wing, and he helped me hire session musicians and a producer out of Nashville so that we could record an album that we could shop around to record labels. And I remember being in the recording studio with these incredibly talented musicians working on my music and just feeling on top of the world, like I was actually making progress on my dream. Not only was I having fun doing what I loved, but I felt supported by my professor and honored and excited to have these real musicians playing my songs and bringing them to life. I even had a cliche photo shoot for the album cover, complete with pictures of me holding a guitar, standing in front of a brick wall or some train tracks, looking deeply pensive and creative. I felt legit. But as we began to hear back from the record labels that I pitched my album to, it became clear that the best I was going to be offered is what they call a development deal, which means they would sign me as an artist, but they wouldn't pay me until I had developed a bit more. Basically sold a bunch of albums on my own, proving to them that I was a horse worth backing. Now, as I was newly engaged to be married at the time, this wasn't going to work. Like, I needed to make real money to pay my real bills. And so, after years of hard work, my dream came to a screeching halt. And you know, the sad irony out of all of this was that the name of my album was Pipe Dream. Well, it was about to get worse because in 2009, and after a couple of years of working in corporate America and in the middle of the Great Recession, my wife and I picked up and moved 1,000 miles away from home. We had our first baby, we bought our first house, and then I lost my second job in 10 months. Talk about timing. Now, fortunately, we had some money set aside for a rainy day like this, but as you can imagine, we burned through that money pretty quickly. And eventually, my wife came to me one day and told me about a friend of hers whose husband had lost his job in construction, and they had applied for food stamps. They call it SNAP now. But it was more than enough to cover their groceries each month. So she asked if we could apply as well, and I refused. How could I, someone with a college degree, someone who's worked a job since the age of 14, just wave the white flag and ask the government for handouts. I think, like a lot of people who have benefited from this kind of help, I just never in a million years imagined I'd find myself in this situation. Well, my wife's a persistent woman, so 2 weeks later, she came back to me and asked again if we could consider applying. This time I relented. And with practically zero income, we easily qualified for food stamps, which did help pay for groceries for the next 18 months. Now, during this season, I felt scared, I felt embarrassed, unable to provide. Here I was, 26 years old, with a wife and a baby and a mortgage, and not only was I not making progress towards any semblance of a career, but I was actually moving backwards. At our lowest point, we were making around $500 a month. And as my wife likes to remind me, we were so broke, we couldn't afford sunblock. And we live in Florida, the Sunshine State. I used to feel safe and secure back when I had money in my savings account. But now, having spent through all my savings, I felt my grip on what little money we did have getting tighter and tighter. You ever have that feeling? Well, it was in this moment that we were faced with a very specific question. Are we going to continue to give to charity even though we barely have enough money for ourselves? Now, for context, back when my wife and I both had stable jobs and a stable income, giving to charity was a regular part of our lives. Like many people with a religious or a faith background, we believed in giving 1/10 of our income away to others. And that's all fine and good. But could we really afford to give money now when money was so scarce? This question kickstarted our giving journey. So we did the almost unthinkable. We recommitted to giving 10% of our income away, even though we barely had enough money for food. And in this process, we discovered something surprising. It felt so good to be able to support others, the poor, the marginalized, the hungry, even in the middle of our financial low point. Like, our attention was less on ourselves and our frustrating situation, and more on the fact that we could still help others. And that felt incredible. Well, it turns out there's science to back this up. You see, those feel-good effects I had when giving, they actually begin in the brain. Stephen G. Post, the director of the Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics at New York Stony Brook University, calls it the giver's glow. The response, he says, is triggered by brain chemistry in what's called the mesolimbic pathway, which recognizes rewarding stimuli. Now, according to Post, philanthropy doles out several different happiness chemicals, including dopamine, powerful endorphins that give people a sense of euphoria, and oxytocin, which is associated with tranquility, serenity, or inner peace. Also, research being done through the Science of Generosity Initiative at the University of Notre Dame has discovered that those who give 10% of their income away report to be 35% happier than those who don't. So there we were, giving 10% of our income away and actually loving it. So we decided to do something even crazier. We committed to giving an even higher percentage of our income away each year, no matter what. It became like a fun game. As my new business began to grow and our giving increased tremendously, it became so exciting to see just how much we could give away and bless others. And I'm happy to report that today we have reached our bucket list goal of giving 50% of our income away each month, and we're having a ball doing it. But you don't have to give 10% of your income away or even give to a charity at all to take advantage of these happiness benefits. Simply the act of spending some of your money on someone else, what's called pro-social spending, leads to reports of greater happiness and satisfaction. Dr. Elizabeth Dunn, a social psychologist at the University of British Columbia, actually tested this in a simple experiment where participants were randomly assigned to one of 4 spending conditions, receiving either $5 or $20 to spend on either themselves or someone else. So the participants in the personal spending condition were asked to spend their windfall on a bill or an expense or a small gift for themselves, where the participants in the pro-social spending condition were asked to spend their money on a gift for someone else or a donation to charity. At the end of the day, the participants who had spent money on others reported happier than those who spent money on themselves. Interestingly, the amount of money that each participant spent, $5 or $20, had no influence on happiness levels, suggesting that how you spent your money was more important than how much money you spent. According to Dr. Dunn, in order to match the benefits to happiness of giving to charity, you would have to have about twice as much income. And they found this to be true among participants in every income bracket. So, here's what I've learned. If you want to increase your chances of happiness, and if you're able to, commit to giving some of your money away. In my opinion, it is the ultimate win-win. Starting today, you could literally be happier and make the world a better place at the same time, all by simply giving a portion of your income away. And you can do this in a bunch of fun and unique ways. Here's just a handful of examples of how my family's done this in the past. Last year when inflation was on the rise and the cost of gas and groceries was skyrocketing, we went out and bought a bunch of gas and grocery gift cards and anonymously deposited them in mailboxes around the neighborhood. At Christmas time, we bought Christmas trees for people who can't afford them. When we go out to a restaurant or on a cruise, we purposely over-tip the waitstaff or the room steward. Giving has been the most fun we've ever had with money. So what about you? How can you increase your happiness? Well, starting today, if you're able to, pick a charity or a cause that you're passionate about and commit to donating at least 1% of your income to it each month. If that's too much of a stretch, then simply start by buying coffee for a friend or paying for someone's meal next time you're out with people. Just make the mental commitment to give. And if you're already giving, consider raising your standard of giving this year. In fact, if you're able to, you could pick a target percentage that you'd love to reach one day and steadily increase your giving each year until you hit that goal. Imagine if all of us committed to giving a bit more of our income away each year. Imagine what kind of good we could do. Imagine what kind of world we could create. And at the same time, imagine just how much happier we'd be ourselves. King Solomon, one of the richest people to ever walk the face of the earth, said 3,000 years ago, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. And he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." My hope is that you will find refreshment in refreshing others.
We just heard Graham explore how giving back to others can help us achieve happiness. In our final talk, Robin Camarote, executive coach, facilitator, and consultant, will share her story and how she became an admirable manager and how she found happiness in properly managing others. Robin will emphasize the importance of eliminating the term people manager and how properly working with others can impact personal and professional environments.
I was 3 years old when I got my first job in management. It was 1977 when my parents brought my little sister home from the hospital. And as I looked over the edge of the bassinet at her scrunchy little pink face, I vaguely remember thinking, I'm the boss of you. And in the coming years, I got 2 more siblings. And so by the age of 6, I had a staff. And like so many other big sisters growing up, my approach was command and control. It's not that I consciously wanted things my way. I just assumed that everybody else wanted things my way too. They were just waiting for me to show up and tell them what to do. And when they didn't do whatever it was to my specifications, I did it for them, annoyed. One time, that same little sister and I were playing the kids' card game, Go Fish. You know, it's the one where you make matches. Do you have a 2? No? Okay, go fish. And she was taking forever to arrange her cards. And I said, hurry up. And she fumbled with her cards some more, and she was trying to shield them from my view, which was even more annoying. So I took all of her cards and I said, just sit there and watch me play. So if you've ever played Go Fish or any other card game for that matter, you know this is completely ridiculous. But it is a sure-to-win strategy. And when she got bored of watching me win every hand, she got up and walked out. So I'll admit, I was bossy, I was controlling, I was demanding, but I also cared a lot. Because the truth about big sisters is that our relentless intrusion into your life is because we want the best for you. And we're not sure you're going to get there on your own. We want you to love us for saving you from yourself. It's kind of like a benevolent dictatorship. And so growing up in this mindset, I collected management roles like the captain of this squad and the president of this club. And in 11th grade, I got the role of the lead defense attorney in the mock trial. And students got to pick which side they wanted to be on. And as they gathered around my desk, I thought, this is awesome, my new staff. And in the coming weeks, we prepared. And on the day of the trial, they read the scripts I'd written exactly like I told them to do. And then I delivered our closing arguments. When the jury came back in, I knew what was about to happen. We won, not guilty. I was so happy. I was so proud of them. I was so proud of myself. And mostly for them not questioning me. And that moment catalyzed the kind of manager that I wanted to be. Responsible, respected, in charge, unquestioned, and winning. So jumping ahead, I got a job at a big management consulting firm after college, and I loved it. I loved working. And for the first decade, I steadily climbed the corporate ladder, and my management style seemed to be holding up. And then I finally got that one big promotion. And with it, I got a new staff assigned to me. And when I called the first meeting after that promotion, I vaguely remember looking around the conference room at their faces and thinking, I'm the boss of you. But this wasn't a card game with my little sister or students in a pretend trial. These were highly educated adults with their own ideas about how to get things done. And for me, that was a problem. Explaining why I wanted things my way was slowing us down. Under pressure, my style shifted from benevolent dictator to just dictator, plain and simple. Without intending to, I became the world's worst manager. It was like reading a textbook of what not to do. I promised one staffer a promotion, and when her work started to slip, I changed my mind. But I never fully explained why. I didn't have the time, and I didn't know how. I vented to one team member about another, thinking that conversation was just between us. It wasn't. It never is. I even reprimanded a junior staffer in front of the whole team on his birthday. I mean, we had just had cake. I was mean. And as tensions rose, the team would come in and ask for changes, and I resented them for wasting my time. I would turn them away, one after another. And then one Friday afternoon, half my team quit. 10 out of 20 people. They came into my office, one after another, with a single sheet of paper, a resignation letter. As the last one walked out, I knew what was about to happen. I started to cry, like an ugly cry, like trying to suck the tears back into my eyes kind of cry, and then my nose was running, and I was just a mess. I was so mad at them, and I was so mad at myself. I had lost big time. And I put my face down on my desk, and the tears made my cheeks stick to all the papers and Post-it notes. And I sat there thinking, if I do nothing else in my career, I want to be a good manager. So I had to dry my eyes and start figuring out what that meant for me. Coming back in the next Monday, my first thing was to apologize to my remaining team. And in the coming week, I met with each one and for the first time started listening to what they wanted and needed from our work. And I realized what should have been obvious all along. Taking care of them was taking care of our business. And so in their most recent State of the Global Workplace report, Gallup says that only 21% of people feel engaged at work. And this has a lot to do with their immediate supervisor. And so for me to be a good manager, I had to work on myself. And of course, that process took months and is still ongoing. Went to leadership training, I got a coach, and I read a lot. And in all of that, I learned two things that unlocked my struggle and why I think so many other managers struggle too. The first was a bit of a history lesson. I'm sure I'd never really thought about it, maybe assumed managers always existed. But in fact, the title manager came about during the Industrial Revolution. Growing businesses needed people in positions to oversee a largely uneducated workforce. They were doing factory and assembly line work. They needed the machines and the people to produce consistently. The second thing I learned was research on self-determination theory by doctors Richard Ryan and Edward Deci. They say as humans, we have a basic human need for competence, feeling that we're effective in meeting demands, autonomy, having say in how we spend our time and energy, and relatedness, feeling cared for by those around us. And so while Dr. Ryan and Dr. Deci might not care for the acronym CAR, it's an easy way to remember this: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And so what I realized is that when I had infringed on my employees' feelings of competence, autonomy, and relatedness, they shut down. And as I've shared, they eventually quit. And through my own painful process, I realized this fundamental truth. Employees don't want to be managed. They want to feel effective. They want to have say in how they work, and they want to feel connected to those around them. And they will happily follow a leader who makes those things possible. So when anyone infringes on someone's feelings of competence, autonomy, and relatedness without their express permission, they resist. Permission matters. And it's true in life as it is at work. So take flying, for example. We might like traveling, but not really riding on an airplane. For the sake of the schedule and everyone's safety, our basic human need for self-determination is taken away, temporarily. It's that, plus sitting inches away from strangers, that makes us not like flying. But we know once we land, we get our autonomy back. And so we effectively give the airline permission to manage us, because it's that, or we don't fly. So back at the office, working for a manager can feel like a never-ending plane ride. The difference is that managers, kind of like big sisters, are typically assigned to you. There's no choice in the matter. If I'd said out loud every time I thought it, I'm the boss of you, whether it was to my sister, my classmates, my team, their reflexive human response would have been, no, you're not. There was no permission granted. So now, as a leadership development trainer and coach, I've observed over and over again that managers are the solution to a problem that no longer exists in our knowledge economy. We don't need people looking over other shoulders to manage consistency and productivity. Our outcomes are proof of our work. And while many managers have adopted a more empathetic approach, the title manager still carries all that Industrial Revolution baggage. And titles matter. Titles are an organization's attempt to grant permission for one group to control another. But an organization can't do that. Only I can do that, and only you can do that. I'm the boss of me, and you're the boss of you. You might be familiar with the saying, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And the data supports that. In another Gallup study, they reported that 75% of people who voluntarily left their jobs did so because of their boss, not because of the work itself. And what that tells us is that the negative impact of this management mindset on us as individuals and on our businesses is staggering. We have to rethink how work gets done. So business leaders, you can start by eliminating the role and title of managers. So, get rid of all of those deputy regional directors and VPs, and with it, weed out any boss-like behaviors that have people infringing on others' feelings of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. The benefit is that this instantly shifts employees out of resistance when they're working for someone else to shared ownership when they're working together for a common purpose. And then together, you can propel your organization to greater growth and productivity. We must manage the work, lead the people, and own the outcomes. So today, my relationship with my siblings, my childhood staff, is going strong. Almost all of them are speaking to me again. I'm kidding, we're connected to each other and our growing families. And in the years after that mass exodus, we rebuilt our project team to more than 40 strong. And while our lives at our work have taken us in different directions, we're all still close. It's possible for a big sister to grow up. And while I'll never stop caring, I believe that tempering my bossy tendencies with a respect for competence, autonomy, and relatedness, it makes it possible for us all to thrive. Thank you.
As we conclude our event, we hope you enjoyed. Today, our speakers gave us messages of inspiration, but also calls to action. How can they apply to your lives? How can you take those words and use them to make a difference in your life and the community? We hope you leave our event today feeling empowered to use our passions and life experiences for positive change. We hope that you take your own small actions to create big impacts. Just like last year, our team has one rule: leave a community better than it used to be. We hope that you are just as inspired by those words as we are. We hope that you take that message, along with the messages that you heard today from our speakers, to heart. And finally, thank you so much to everyone who made this event possible. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their stories. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting us. And finally, thank you, our audience. Thank you all for being a part of our TEDx community.